Good morning. Yeah, thank you, Alan. And we have been with TAD and TADSummit, I think, from the inception, and I think it has been a great journey. And just to kind of give you a little bit of background about hSenid Mobile, we've been in the business for almost 12 years, and we are kind of seeing the evolution of how things have been moving from messaging and then kind of going into the internet and kind of coming back again and going through all the cycles. And today I thought, I'll talk to you about something which is very interesting for us, because we've been working with Asian operators in the area of messaging, especially with the telco side. So we actually very early stage, the service delivery platforms, we started opening up APIs, but our real strength is on how to make it simple for non-developers to be able to develop services. So that's how actually we started with the Asiata group, and we actually grew that business very much in the way that they actually won at Mobile World Congress one of the awards for being the most innovative platform, and this was maybe about 4 years back. Since then, we have actually moved from telecom also into the enterprise side. So, and we have some very interesting learnings that we have had, and then I want to kind of talk about that with you today and maybe have a discussion on that and where we see what we call the Enterprise CPaaS, what is happening and, what the landscape. But before that, I'd like to maybe talk a little bit about what we call the evolution of communication in that from our standpoint. So we had like discrete communication very early stage. You had your phones, you had, your laptops, you communicated, very much discrete. Then from there, we actually moved into mixed communications, what we call where you had a phone, you had your Skype and your voice and your maybe pagers, you had multiple devices that you had. From that, we actually all went into what we call unified communication, which was the first part of eCPaaS, CPaaS, where you had APIs and you were able to kind of communicate through them and share information. Then we call about what we call converged communication. This is what we will talk about today a little bit more in detail. And there we actually started seeing how communication with CPaaS, what we call CPaaS 2.0, where API started coming in. So if you really look at what was CPaaS 2.0, where we actually start seeing video, email, messaging, voice, social media, all that started coming together. Then we had APIs, and then the enterprises were able to kind of communicate through this and was able to kind of consume services. But what happened is that, do you really think that we call converged communication, whether it's, has communication really converged? I think if you look at from the time that we started and to today, so you get all different new ways of communicating, whether it's from Slack, whether, whether it's your, IMs, whether it's, Facebook IM, or whether it's your WhatsApp to Viber to all that started, and you actually started kind of going out again rather than really converging. So converging from a point of view, from an enterprise point of view, so I'm actually looking this from a businesses and from enterprise. That's where we actually spend a lot of our time. Because if you go and start talking with, whether from any department, from marketing to sales to anybody you talk about that, they have so many different mechanisms now to communicate and to be able to get their message out. And how do you kind of really bring all that? And that's where in our opinion, that's where the next big opportunity is going to lie in this. So then we looked at it in two different ways. Okay, what are the building blocks for converged communication? So we came with this saying, okay, you need to have a technical unification and you need to have a service unification we talked about. So, and we said, okay, why communication hasn't converged? So in our opinion, we feel that there are some roadblocks. So especially we thought, there are 3 roadblocks to really get communications to converged. And what are they? So big, number 1, is the dependency on IT. Though we have actually moved a lot outside, to be able to do our own communication, we still, as an organization, as enterprises, you have still a lot of dependency with IT. We thought once we start moving to the cloud, we can actually be independent. We thought that we can now go and actually do your own thing without the blessings of the IT. But if you really look at what has happened is when you start kind of using all these different communication mechanisms, bringing your own devices to office, to your companies, you still need to work with IT. Then also we saw that there's incomplete engagement. What does that mean? There's so much communication going on, but as an organization, are you really be able to kind of measure it, monitor it, track it, be able to kind of find what's really going on? And the third is imprecise insights. There's so much of data, but are we really making use of that data to make real decisions? So that's where we thought these were the real barriers for really becoming a converged communication platform. So to this, let's go through each of these, like the IT dependency. So if you really think about, you want to kind of automate business operations. For example, that, you think that, okay, I want to send, as a bank, I want to send some reminders about your, payment reminders. But, a lot of the time you only send your payment reminders, but that's only one way. Does that really kind of click on this, go and, pay it right now, or whether you can go and schedule your payments, does that whole thing happens? Very rarely that happens. Extended services. Say that you're in customer service and you're kind of listening to somebody on something, but you need now, as an agent, I want to kind of transfer this to a more technical person, be able to, really solve the issue of my customer. Can you do that? Most of the time you can't. You can't really have a frictionless way of passing that information to somebody to be able to see that whole history of what happened and being able to address that. So that's why we say extended, services. Then convert ideas into, really innovation. What does that mean? Say that you are in marketing, you are in the marketing department, you want to run certain campaigns through multiple channels. You want to run it through your, to targeting the millennials, maybe the Facebook, the Snapchat and all that, and then you want to use your email and some of your text messaging. Can these be run without really being, outside your scope of the work that you're doing? So a lot of this really kind of creates an environment where you are not really being able to kind of, bring the power of communication together. Now let's look at imprecise insights. So here we talk about unable to quantify the business value of interactions. So there are so much of interactions going on, but are you able to measure it? Are you be able to kind of look at and put your finger and say, okay, this one had this kind of ROI for me. Thousands of conversations happening, but few results oriented, because we are in a world of kind of a machine gun approach. We send things out and just hope and pray that somebody kind of be able to look at that. Can you bring all that kind of stuff together through this converged communication? And low response rate due to lack of awareness of customer channel prioritization. So which channels are working better for me? Is there a way that we can measure? Not really. So coming back on the imprecise insights, here we are talking about, you have a lot of data that you have collected, but am I be able to make decisions looking at that and say, oh, this really worked very well. So I have past data so that I can really build my future campaigns on that. Difficult to extract, like emotional intelligence or emotions, For example, think about that, you are running an insight survey on an HR department. You want to see the way they respond. You want to see what's that whole empathy, whole that emotion, can that be captured so as from an HR can now create programs and activities, initiatives on that. So these are all possible, but at the moment, because there's so much of disparity ways of communication that you really are not being able to look at that. And last but not least, there are a lot of new technologies, latest technologies that people are playing around with this virtual reality, augmented reality. Are we bringing that information and that data and looking again can that be used for real benefit of an organization or enterprise? So that's what we feel that the whole barriers that are really creating to create a converged communication. So what's the answer? So we looked at this very carefully because we've been working with enterprises a lot. We said the one way of kind of bringing all that, this is what we call CPaaS. And we said, okay, we will create an enterprise CPaaS where we will bring all that stuff through wizards and templates and really kind of take you through a journey. So if you look at an enterprise, it could be an HR department, it could be a marketing, it could be customer service, product support, finance, or even business, small business users. Now, with an eCPaaS platform, you are able to kind of bring a lot of the things that spoke before together. And that's where we see the communication is coming into convergence. Let me run through a very simple recruitment life cycle, what I call the new ways of recruiting. And it's geared from, you are starting as a stranger, you actually start able to kind of use different channels to send your messaging, not only through message boards, but also through Facebook, through Snapchat, through all that. And then a visitor kind of looks at that, becomes interested, they get converted, and then they start as an applicant. You actually start, and all this information that you're having from multiple channels, you're actually bringing into one portal. So from an applicant, you're actually moving into collaboration. You start asking, they see what's the culture of the company, they have, conversations going on, and they kind of become interested and becoming a prospect for you as an applicant. Then what you do from there, you actually go into connect, and then you bring that person, you do the interviews and bring that person online, and the person becomes an employee. So this simple case study, what I showed you from an HR department, you can think the same thing that you can look at other different departments. Let's see, we actually did a small video where, internally we were kind of looking at that. How does this work? So you're looking to kind of recruit somebody on this, and then you actually, as an HR manager, you are creating the job profile, sends it through multiple messaging. One could be Facebook, one could be WhatsApp, one could be Snapchat. The stranger, they take a look at it, they find, oh, this is interesting for me. I start kind of applying for that. And while you're doing that, you're communicating with your prospective candidates. This could be for the shortlisted teams. You receive your resumes, you go through the shortlisting, you actually create that, and this is all created through a wizard-based platform that we talked about before. And then you can actually schedule phone screen, could be a video conference, send reminders, do the interviews, and then connect with them, do the onboarding process, bring them out, and that becomes a candidate, becomes a build seamless and strong relations with shareholders. So that's what is what we talk about eCPaaS. That's what we feel that this is going to be the next new kind of not a revolution, but that will start helping your own organizations to be able to build a converged communication platform. And we are working with enterprises on this. We are actually planning to launch this in time to come, and we have a cool white paper that we have if anybody is interested in kind of downloading that. And it's all about just purely on what we see our world from an enterprise CPaaS. Thank you.
Great. Any questions for Dinesh? So one of the things that Dinesh maybe didn't fully highlight is Dinesh has a CPaaS enabler and he's enabled a whole range of different telcos. So, of course, Dialog in Sri Lanka, BD Apps, which is Robi in Bangladesh. And they are some of the most successful telco CPaaS programs in the world, full stop. So we see a lot of attention on what AT&T does, but actually when you look at the numbers, it's actually what's been supported by hSenid Mobile. And the key, I think, and maybe you can talk to this a little bit more, there's a focus on APIs, yes, but also the real, if you like, accelerant has been on widgets, wizards, to make it as easy as possible for not developers, but small business owners to take advantage of the capabilities exposed by the CPaaS platform.
Correct. So that's what I talked about. And from the telecom industry side, we saw that we actually kind of opened on the APIs, and we create a similar kind of a messaging wizards that small enterprises or small business users can come and actually build services and start bringing them out. And we have, if you look at the numbers, there are about 9,000 developers now, and maybe there's about 45,000 different services they bring for different enterprises. So that's the telco side. So the enterprise, what we actually doing now is kind of bringing that same kind of wizard-based technology, to which we want to kind of enable. Our whole thing is to empower departments and organizations to be able to go and develop their communication-based services without having, working with IT or putting a project plan, because these are things that does not take much time for you to do.
Exactly, because I think this is important learning for all CPaaS providers, in that they'll try and give their pitch to an enterprise, and it's almost like magic happens. You have some APIs, and then magic to solving your enterprise problems. Right. And I think those three barriers you highlighted remain relatively unreported across the industry.
That's right. So that's where we see, because I think people were thinking, IT is the only barrier. So if I can go into the cloud, now I can go and kind of cheat this by doing this, in the cloud, but that's only one aspect of that. But the thing is, you don't really have a converged part of kind of building that end to end. And how do you kind of bring that whole frictionless way of kind of bringing that service to market? So if I had to kind of go out and explain about it all the time, you're not going to kind of get the real benefit out of it.
Exactly.